What Stephanie White revealed during her live television interview may be one of the most troubling moments of the Indiana Fever season, and it should seriously concern every Fever supporter far beyond missed shots, poor rotations, or any statistical struggles seen throughout the year. After the extremely intense and physical showdown against the Golden State Valkyries, White was questioned about the technical foul given to Caitlin Clark during a heated fourth-quarter confrontation that quickly became one of the most dramatic and widely discussed moments of the entire game. But instead of addressing it directly, Stephanie White appeared completely unaware of the situation, staring at the reporter with a blank expression before admitting she had no idea Clark had even been issued a technical foul. She openly stated that she did not know what had happened, a shocking confession that immediately raised serious questions about the team's awareness, communication, and overall control during one of the most emotional moments of the night.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Were you worried at all that she would have been ejected?
I didn't know that she got a technical either. So, I guess they announced it, but nobody told us. So, I thought the officials would have told us, but...
The head coach of professional basketball organization somehow had no awareness that her biggest star, the emotional heartbeat of the entire franchise, had been given a technical foul during the very game she was coaching from the sidelines in real time, wearing a headset and surrounded by assistant coaches whose primary responsibility is tracking and communicating every critical moment happening on the court. She was completely unaware of it. Welcome back to WNBA Pro, because that one incredibly alarming admission reveals the true issue growing inside the Indiana Fever organization. We are pulling back the curtain on what appears to be a deeply flawed coaching structure that goes far beyond simple roster chemistry problems or player inconsistency. If you believe the Fever's struggles were only connected to talent or rotations, it may be time to completely rethink the situation. We are about to dissect a major weakness in Stephanie White's defensive system, expose the breakdown in sideline communication, and explain exactly why this coaching approach could put the entire roster in serious danger once the playoff race becomes more intense. Here's why missing something as massive as a technical foul is not a minor mistake, but a clear sign of a much larger systemic issue showing how this coaching staff handles pressure situations.
Yeah, y'all know what time it is. Y'all know exactly what time it is, man. We got to get into this tape and break this film down. Now, Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White made a vital mistake that if she continues to make, this will cost the Indiana Fever games. 100%. They will lose games if she keeps... Stephanie White elected to continue to switch these bigs onto guards and leave these bigs on an island on the perimeter versus these guards that they could not stay in front of, and then leaving the guards stuck on bigs for throw-ins into the post or for all.
A substitution error is something coaches can argue about endlessly. Deciding to leave Caitlin Clark on the floor for 37 minutes instead of 30 is a strategic call. Choosing to bench a productive reserve scorer is another coaching decision entirely. Those kinds of moves live in the world of tactics, philosophy, and post-game debate. But losing track of what's unfolding on your own bench in real time is not strategy. It points to a breakdown in fundamental communication. In a professional basketball setting, a technical foul instantly shifts the entire situational landscape. It impacts substitution plans, late-game management, and whether you keep a player active or pull them to avoid the risk of a second technical that would trigger an automatic ejection. If Clark had picked up another technical in a close fourth quarter, she would have been forced out of the game, leaving the team to finish without its primary floor general, all because critical information was not properly relayed from the bench staff. That kind of lapse in awareness doesn't stay isolated. It starts to spill directly into how the team actually executes on the floor, especially when it comes to defensive positioning and overall coordination.
Is her initial defender. Monique Billings is guarding the screener, and then you're going to see Monique Billings get stuck on Gabby Williams, okay? Let's get into it. Okay, now we got Gabby Williams out here on the perimeter on Monique Billings. You got Kelsey Mitchell stuck on a big who's about to walk her down to the post.
Smothering on defense when they get there. Stokes has the size.
That is too easy. That is high school level. That's too easy of coverage. You can't just be switching these little guards onto these bigs and thinking the big isn't just going to dive straight to the block or straight to...
While communication appears to be breaking down on the sideline, the defensive structure itself is producing equally concerning results on the floor. Stephanie White has leaned into a switch-heavy pick-and-roll coverage that looks increasingly outdated and overly passive, asking players to avoid the harder work of navigating screens by simply exchanging assignments on every action. Instead of requiring perimeter defenders to fight over picks, stay attached, and apply consistent pressure, the system often defaults to the easiest possible solution: a straight switch on every ball screen. The problem is that this approach repeatedly generates obvious and exploitable mismatches, possession after possession, forcing defenders into uncomfortable matchups that the offense can target immediately. Over time, this predictable pattern turns every screen action into a potential advantage for the opponent and puts constant strain on the Fever's defensive integrity, exposing structural weaknesses that become harder to hide as the game progresses.
Out here on Caitlin Chin, and Kelsey Mitchell is stuck on a big one.
Here's Shem. The switch on to Boston. Tries to use her speed and will.
Why are we leaving Aaliyah Boston out there guarding their point guard on the perimeter? Of course she's going to get danced on. Of course she's going to drive by her. And now she got an and one, and Aaliyah Boston picks up an unnecessary foul from being in a position she shouldn't have even been in. Stephanie White.
Boston just led Clark too far. William.
First, look at what the system is doing to Aaliyah Boston. Boston is an elite-level center, drafted to control the paint, protect the rim, and anchor the defense inside. But under White's constant switching scheme, she's routinely dragged out her comfort zone and forced to guard quick guards on the perimeter. The screen comes, there's minimal resistance, the switch happens, and suddenly Boston is isolated far from the basket, stuck on an island nearly 30 feet out. The opposing guard immediately senses the advantage, attacks the space, breaks her down off the dribble, and drives straight to the rim for an easy finish and potential and one. Boston ends up picking up avoidable, draining fouls simply because she's placed in a situation that doesn't play to her strengths. But the damage doesn't stop there. The same mismatch problem creates an equally damaging ripple effect on the other side of the action.
Switch smalls onto bigs all game.
Too strong on a three. That's a me here pulling down the rebound. And
You get a small stuck on a big, offensive rebound, put back, lay in. Now, all right. Now you got Lefty. She was balling, man. Tiffany Hayes. You got a switch out onto her. Okay, so you got Monique Billings switched out on Tiffany.
While opposing centers are getting exposed out on the perimeter, the smaller guards are being physically overwhelmed inside the paint. By constantly switching defensive assignments, Stephanie White's system is effectively giving up control of the defensive glass. A bigger forward is able to seal a smaller Indiana guard under the rim, grab easy offensive rebounds, and convert second-chance points with little resistance. A guard like Kelsey Mitchell simply does not have the size to box out a power forward, and the result becomes predictable every time. The film shows it clearly. Smaller defenders are repeatedly dragged into the post, isolated, and outmatched in physical battles. The large gap in free throw attempts is not the result of officiating bias, but rather the natural outcome of a defensive approach that forces players into mismatched positions where they're forced to reach foul or collapse under pressure. These are not random breakdowns, but part of a consistent pattern that ties back to coaching structure. When you connect the dots across the season, the same issues keep appearing. The sideline communication gap, where key in-game details are missed, the defensive system that over-relies on switching and creates constant mismatches, and the offensive rotations that often separate Clark and Boston for too long, disrupting rhythm in tight moments. All of these problems point toward a larger issue: an inability to consistently process and adjust the real-time game flow at a high level. The Indiana Fever have shown strong results with a 4 and 2 start in real postseason potential, with Caitlin Clark producing elite-level numbers and Aaliyah Boston returning to dominant form. But the roster talent is being limited by structural flaws in execution. Against elite teams like the Las Vegas Aces or the New York Liberty, these defensive mismatches will become far more punishing, especially if Boston is forced on the guards on perimeter or Mitchell is left guarding elite post scorers inside. The gap in physicality would be extremely difficult to overcome. The fix is straightforward in concept, but demanding in execution. Tighter real-time communication from the sideline and a shift away from automatic switching toward more disciplined coverage, where guards fight through screens and stay connected to their matchups so Boston can remain protected in the paint where she is most effective. Without those adjustments, the same structural weaknesses will continue to surface in high-pressure playoff situations.